Well, shifting gears now, Tropical Storm Idalia has strengthened into a hurricane as it churns toward Florida's Gulf Coast. It's set to make landfall in the Big Bend region, bringing with it winds of 75 miles per hour and the threat of flash floods. As you can see from some of the imaging there, around 14 million Florida residents are currently under hurricane and tropical storm warnings. Yesterday, FEMA announced nearly $3 billion in funding for communities to build resiliency against climate change-fueled extreme weather. Joining us now is Craig Fugate, former FEMA Administrator. He led the agency through multiple disasters and oversaw the federal government's response to major events such as Hurricane Sandy, Hurricane Matthew, and the 2016 Louisiana flooding as well. We do appreciate you joining us this morning here. In terms of the preparedness that you're seeing at the moment, what should be at the top of people's list when they see warnings like this coming up?
Well, the people that live along the coast need to move to higher ground. We use a lot of terms that kind of sanitize what's happening when we talk about, storm surge. The way people drown in these storms or die is they drown, or it's blunt trauma for cars and boats washing through their homes. So the critical thing right now is for people in the coastal areas to heed the evacuation orders, move to higher ground. They still got time. For everybody else, it's getting ready for a lot of wind and water. Power outages will probably be measured in days or weeks if the storm comes through as forecasted. So again, for people in the coastal areas and evacuation zones, now's the time to move to higher ground. For the folks that are not in the evacuation zones, is to prepare for the impacts. Most notably, it's going to be high wind and power outages after the storm, but also isolated tornadoes and heavy rainfall.
How is the funding dispersed? Where are the areas that FEMA would typically look to kind of go down the list of prioritization?
Well, when you're talking about these dollars the administration announced for building climate resilience, these are programs that FEMA has run before, but now with more emphasis on building resiliency from future impacts. And it's things that will go out to deal with things like flood risk, looking at how to address heat islands that are occurring in urban areas, how to harden infrastructure so it's more resilient before the next storm. So all of these things are projects across the nation. We're talking about the hurricanes now here in Florida, but we're not the only area. Wildfires in California, extreme rainfall events across the country, tornadoes, other things. But look at the heat dome that's been sitting over central U.S. So all of these things across the nation would be things that FEMA would be considering as the states make the request.
And Craig, this is coming at a time when we do have multiple extreme events, and you're seeing insurers pulling back, saying that they're not going to, take on new customers now because the cost is just too high. What can people then really do to protect themselves or protect their belongings and their livelihoods as insurers pull back?
Well, this is the challenge we're seeing, that we're running into risks that are becoming uninsurable. And for the insurance industry, not selling insurance means they can't make money, but they can't sell it and lose money. And so I think for a lot of people, it's unfortunate. We're having to make decisions about, buying insurance at very high rates if it is available, or going without insurance. And that's going to put a lot of homeowners, particularly those that most of their equities in their homes, at tremendous risk because nobody's coming in to bail them out without having insurance. So the federal government doesn't provide that kind of assistance after a disaster.
This has been one of, if not the hottest year on record, Craig. And so with that in mind, companies, individuals, households are trying to wrap their minds around what a future where climate change drives more adverse weather events means for the economy, how this shifts even where people live at. And so for all of these considerations, for the heat dome that we've seen this year, as you mentioned, what type of economic impact are we really having to grapple with at this point?
Well, we'll still be adding up cost. I think when you think about heat waves, one of the things we know is it's one of the deadliest of all of the hazards we face from weather. But it also has significant economic cost as energy bills go up, productivity goes down, disruptions in supply chains, impacts to agriculture, especially things like flash droughts. And the fact we're in a global economy where it's not just here in the U.S. that are being impacted. So I think if you think about it, we've basically built our economies around the last 100 years worth of stable weather patterns. And now as they become more extreme, we're not going to adjust to them overnight. So there's, again, the administration, $3 billion, I'd say that's a good start. But I think for a lot of industries, for a lot of communities, and for individuals, it's going to be a major adjustment with very little time. And we're going to continue to see these losses increase until we get to the point where we are adapting faster than the climate has changed. And that's the thing. The climate has already changed. The question is, how much worse can it get?
And so, Craig, for people watching this who are wondering what should be in my preparedness kit when you do have something like a hurricane or floods coming towards you, what are the top things that people should have in a preparedness kit?
If you live on the coast, a go kit, you and your pets leave, move to higher ground. If you're not in the evacuation zones, then you need to look at whether you should stay where you're at or evacuate. If you're staying, and that's what we recommend for most people, you need to be prepared for extended power outages, disruptions to your waters, not being able to go get medication or go to the store. So you need to have enough supplies to carry you for several days. In fact, as we're seeing increasingly, up to a week is not uncommon for disruptions to the supply chains before they can start back. So those are the things you need to be thinking about. But before the storms threaten, before the fires threaten, do an insurance checkup and make sure you have proper coverage. And here's one I'm going to plug over and over again. Get flood insurance. I don't care if anybody's told you don't live in a flood zone. We're seeing too many extreme rainfall events, and it is the fastest growing risk we're seeing is the uninsured risk without flood insurance. Homeowner policies will not cover rising waters. You have to have a separate policy. And this is something FEMA's tracking. More and more areas are flooding where people have very low rates of flood insurance, usually less than 5% in most areas outside of the traditional flooding areas. And that means you're putting your financial recovery at risk by not having flood insurance.
Craig Fugate, former FEMA Administrator, joining us here on Yahoo Finance. Craig, thanks so much for the timely insights here and the word of warning as well and caution. Appreciate it.
Thank you.